Opening, not good enough. Caleb Turner felt the cold weight of the principal's words settle on his chest like a stone. He stood frozen in front of the polished oak desk, his fingers clutching the frayed strap of his worn-out backpack. The office smelled like expensive cologne and power, a place he never truly belonged. Principal Donald Rivington didn't even bother to look up as he signed the expulsion form. "This school was built for excellence," the man said, his voice clipped and smooth, like someone who'd practiced authority his entire life. "We have a reputation to uphold, young man. We simply cannot allow certain distractions." Caleb's brows knitted. Distractions. Rivington finally looked at him then, a sharp, calculating glance over thin gold-rimmed glasses. "Let's be honest, Caleb. Ridgeview Academy is not a place for farm boys with dirt under their nails and discount shoes. You've done well, I'll admit that. But you're not Ridgeview material. Not truly." It felt like a punch. Caleb's mouth went dry. He had worked harder than anyone in this building, up at 4:30 a.m. to feed the chickens and water the fields before biking 5 miles to school. He didn't own the latest phone. His lunch came in a reused paper bag. But his grades were impeccable, his record spotless. Still, none of it mattered. From outside the glass wall, he could hear the muffled sound of laughter, students passing by, whispering, pointing. And then, of course, came the voice he hated most. "Guess the mud finally stuck, huh, Turner?" Chase Harrington stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, his designer jacket slung casually over one shoulder. His smirk widened. "This place is better off without charity cases." Caleb didn't answer. He wouldn't give Chase the satisfaction. But something inside him cracked. Not loud. Not violent. Just a slow, silent splintering of everything he had held onto. The belief that hard work was enough, that character mattered more than status. 2 security officers appeared. One reached for his backpack, the other motioned toward the exit. "You're done here," Rivington said without emotion. "Your parents will be notified." Caleb walked past Chase without meeting his eyes. He kept his head up, even as the laughter chased him down the corridor like ghosts. When he reached the sidewalk, the cold winter wind bit at his cheeks. He didn't know how he got home. The gravel road to the farm blurred through tears he refused to wipe away. His mother stood on the porch, drying her hands on her apron. His father stepped out beside her, eyes already filled with questions. He didn't say much. "They kicked me out," was all he managed. And then he walked inside, shoulders heavy with a shame he didn't deserve. Caleb sat at the edge of his bed, the springs creaking softly beneath him as he pulled off his dirt-stained sneakers. The room was small, barely enough space for the bed, a wooden desk, and the bookshelf his father had built by hand years ago. The wallpaper peeled slightly near the corners, and the old ceiling fan spun with a tired whir, pushing around air that smelled faintly of hay and home. Down the hall, his parents' muffled voices rose and fell in quiet worry. He knew they were trying not to argue, not to let him hear. But he heard everything. He always did. A soft knock came, then the door opened. His mother, Grace, stepped in, holding a cup of warm milk like she used to when he was little. Her eyes were red. She didn't ask if he was okay, she already knew. She sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. It was small, weathered from years of tending gardens and washing endless piles of laundry, but it grounded him. It always had. "We'll fight this," she whispered. "Your father's already calling people. Someone has to listen." Caleb nodded slowly but didn't speak. There was a storm behind his eyes, but no words to match it. His father, Tom, entered a few minutes later. He was a tall man, strong-backed, with hands that told stories of decades in the fields. He stood in the doorway, silent, arms folded across his chest. When his gaze landed on Caleb, it softened, just barely, and he stepped forward. "You did nothing wrong, son," he said. "You hear me?" Caleb nodded again. Tom sat on the other side of the bed and exhaled hard, the way a man does when he's holding in too much. I sent you to that school thinkin' if we just worked hard enough, if we gave you a better chance, maybe the world would see what we see." He paused. "But sometimes, the world doesn't care how hard you work. Sometimes, it just sees the dirt under your nails." Those words sat heavy between them. That night, long after his parents had gone to bed, Caleb lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling like it held the answers. But the questions kept coming. Why did it matter where he came from? Why did a last name or a zip code decide whether you belonged? He had done everything right. Every assignment, every test. He had played by the rules. So why did the rules only seem to work for people like Chase Harrington? He rolled onto his side, the blanket pulled tight around him. "I wish someone saw me," he thought. Someone who could actually change something. Out the window, the moon hung low over the quiet fields, casting silver light over rows of bare soil. It was peaceful, but also isolating. Somewhere beyond those hills, power moved the world. Caleb had none of it. But maybe someone did. And maybe, just maybe, that someone was already on their way. The morning sun rose gently over Ridgeview Academy, casting golden light across the manicured lawns and gleaming stone walls. Students trickled into campus with coffee cups in hand, backpacks slung lazily over designer jackets, their laughter echoing through the courtyard like wind chimes in spring. Then came the roar. At first, it was distant, a low thrum barely distinguishable from a passing truck or a plane overhead. But within seconds, it grew louder, deeper, almost like thunder that refused to fade. Students paused mid-conversation. A few teachers stepped outside, shielding their eyes against the sun. Heads turned toward the sky. And then it appeared. A black helicopter, sleek, massive, and unlike anything anyone had ever seen near Ridgeview, emerged from behind the tree line, its blade slicing through the air with terrifying grace. The machine hovered for a moment, just above the center courtyard, before beginning its descent. Wind erupted in all directions. Girls screamed as their hair whipped wildly across their faces. Papers flew from backpacks, coffee cups tumbled, and cell phones flew up, instantly recording. The school's flag tore loose from its post. Even the proud Ridgeview Lion statue rattled as if the earth itself disapproved of what was coming. Principal Donald Rivington stormed out of the administration building, red-faced, his expensive tie flapping in the chaos. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted, but his words were lost in the roar of spinning blades. The helicopter settled with a final thud, dust curling around its skids. The door remained closed for a moment, long enough to hold the entire school in breathless suspense. Then it opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, composed, and impossibly sharp in a tailored black suit that didn't move an inch despite the whipping wind. His shoes gleamed under the morning sun, and his expression was unreadable behind a pair of dark sunglasses. Two other men followed behind him, dressed similarly, each holding a sleek black case. Their movements were calm, controlled, the kind of calm that only comes from absolute authority. Someone in the crowd gasped. Another whispered, "No way." The insignia on the side of the helicopter said it all, Maddox Earthworks Inc. The man who now strode confidently across Ridgeview's courtyard was none other than Lawrence Maddox, the billionaire agricultural magnate, a name known in every boardroom and on every business news channel across the country. A man who rarely appeared in public, and certainly not at high schools. The silence that followed was thick and taut. Principal Rivington adjusted his tie nervously as Maddox approached, his steps silent but thunderous in presence. The billionaire stopped just a few feet away and slowly removed his sunglasses. "I'm here for Caleb Turner," he said. And just like that, the entire school forgot how to breathe. Principal Donald Rivington forced a smile as he approached the helicopter, but the strain showed in the tightness around his jaw and the hurried patting of dust from his blazer. His carefully curated world, of order, legacy, and selectiveness, was unraveling with every echoing footstep of the man now standing on his campus. "Mr. Maddox," he began, voice raised slightly over the dying whir of the blades, This is quite the surprise." Lawrence Maddox didn't return the pleasantry. He stood tall, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the principal with a coolness that chilled the morning air. Behind him, the two suited men flanked his shoulders like silent sentinels. "I'm here for Caleb Turner," Maddox said simply. Just 6 words, but they struck the crowd like lightning. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Students exchanged wide-eyed glances. A few turned instinctively toward the direction of the gate, as if expecting Caleb to appear out of thin air. Whispers rose like waves crashing against the polished stone of Ridgeview Academy's walls. Did he just say Caleb? No way, the farm kid. But he got expelled. Principal Rivington's face twitched, just slightly, before he quickly recovered. Yes, well. I'm afraid Mr. Turner is no longer enrolled at Ridgeview. As of yesterday, in fact, he said, gesturing vaguely as if the details no longer mattered. We had disciplinary concerns. Maddox didn't blink. What concerns? Rivington hesitated. It's a confidential matter. As you can imagine, we hold our standards very high. Mr. Turner, while a diligent student in some respects, simply wasn't born into the right family. Maddox interrupted, voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. The principal flushed. I never said that. You didn't have to. The silence that followed was brutal. The kind that made every student and teacher feel like they were witnessing something they were never meant to see, a reckoning between two very different kinds of power. Maddox stepped forward, just once, his shoes clicking sharply against the stone walkway. You and I both know Caleb Turner didn't violate any policy. He earned his place here with his mind, his discipline, and his integrity. The only thing he lacked was a name you recognized. Rivington shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Maddox, with all due respect, this is a private institution. We reserve the right to curate our student body in a way that maintains the illusion of superiority. Maddox cut in again, his tone now openly challenging. Rivington's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I've reviewed Ridgeview's public charter, funding sources, and board membership, Maddox continued, lifting a slim tablet from the hand of one of his aides. And I assure you, for a school so concerned with image, the headlines that will come from this will not be flattering. Someone in the crowd gasped again. Students were filming now, phones trembling slightly in their hands, capturing every second. Rivington swallowed hard. This doesn't need to become a spectacle. Maddox gave the faintest of smiles, though there was no humor in it. You made it one the moment you humiliated a young man for the crime of being poor. He took a final step forward. I came here to give you one opportunity to make it right. I suggest you take it. The morning had just begun to settle over Briar Hills when the stillness was shattered. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, barely touching the eggs and toast his mother had placed before him. His flannel shirt hung loose on his frame, hair still uncombed, eyes dull from a night without sleep. Outside the window, the frost still clung to the edges of the barn roof, and the distant mooing of their only cow was the only sound in the air. Until it wasn't. A low rumble rolled over the fields, faint at first, like the tremor of distant thunder. Caleb looked up. The dishes on the table rattled slightly. His mother paused mid-step. His father set down his coffee mug, eyes narrowing. Then came the unmistakable thumping of helicopter blades. Caleb shot to his feet, heart lurching into his throat. He ran out the front door, followed closely by his parents. The wind hit them first, strong and whipping, as a sleek black helicopter descended over their modest farmland, the rotors slicing through the morning quiet like a blade. It touched down in the clearing by the barn, sending loose straw and dirt swirling into the air. Tom Turner instinctively stepped in front of his son, shielding him from the flying debris. Grace held her apron tight, staring at the scene in disbelief. The door of the helicopter opened with a soft hiss. And then, like something out of a world Caleb had only seen on TV, Lawrence Maddox stepped down onto the Turner family's gravel driveway. He looked entirely out of place, tall, poised, dressed in a dark wool coat and black gloves, but his gaze was not one of arrogance. It was focused, deliberate. His eyes found Caleb almost immediately. "You're Caleb Turner," he said, not as a question, but as certainty. Caleb swallowed, throat dry. "Why, yes, sir." Maddox nodded once, then turned to Tom. "Tom Turner," he said, his voice quieter now. "It's been a long time." Tom took a cautious step forward, squinting into the morning sun. Then, recognition dawned in his eyes. "Lawrence Maddox." "I haven't forgotten what you did for me 25 years ago," Maddox continued. "Your work on my first sustainable crop systems saved that entire project. I've followed your family's name ever since." Tom's jaw tightened. "We've done what we can." Maddox's eyes flicked back to Caleb. "And clearly, your son has too." There was a pause. The wind quieted. The world felt like it was holding its breath. "I know what happened at Ridgeview," Maddox said, his voice firmer now. "I know about the expulsion. The humiliation. And I know it wasn't because your son failed, it was because the school did." Caleb stared at him, barely breathing. "I came here for one reason," Maddox said, stepping closer. "To take Caleb back with me. And to make things right." Grace Turner clutched her husband's arm. "But, what do you mean, take him?" Maddox turned to her, his voice soft but resolute. "I mean your son has potential. Real potential. The kind this world tries to bury under wealth and pedigree. I won't let that happen. Not again." He looked back at Caleb, eyes steady. "You ready to go, son?" Caleb glanced at his parents. His father gave the smallest of nods. And in that moment, for the first time since being expelled, Caleb felt something he hadn't in days. Hope. They sat beneath the sycamore tree just beyond the barn. Caleb, his father, and the man whose name held more weight than half the state's politicians combined. The helicopter rested in the clearing behind them, its blades still. Aides stood at a respectful distance, phones and tablets in hand, waiting but not intruding. Caleb rubbed his palms nervously on his jeans. His eyes flicked between his parents and Lawrence Maddox, then dropped to the ground. "You want to know what happened," he said, voice low. "I'll tell you." He took a breath, and then it poured out of him. He told Maddox about the whispers in the hallways that never stopped. About Chase Harrington, all arrogance and family money, who'd made it his mission to remind Caleb every day that he didn't belong. How Caleb's thrift store shoes were laughed at, how his lunch was mocked, how the teachers turned a blind eye every single time. Then came the story of Principal Rivington, how the man summoned Caleb to his office without warning, handed him a folder with expulsion papers, and offered no real explanation. "We have a reputation to protect," the man had said. "And students like you, well, let's just say you don't fit the mold." Caleb's fists were clenched now, knuckles white. He looked at me like I was dirt. Like I was nothing. His mother reached out gently, touching his shoulder. His father stared off toward the fields, jaw tight. Maddox didn't interrupt. He listened with the patience of someone used to people who needed to be heard. When Caleb finally stopped, the silence stretched long. Then Maddox turned to one of his aides. "Start pulling everything you can on Ridgeview's leadership structure, full board roster, voting records, any publicly filed complaints in the past 10 years. I want a preliminary report in my hand within the hour." The aide nodded and stepped away, already typing. Caleb blinked. "You're investigating them?" Maddox's eyes met his, calm, sharp, unwavering. "No. I'm holding them accountable." Tom Turner cleared his throat. "Mr. Maddox, this is more than we ever expected. You don't have to do this." "I know," Maddox replied quietly. "But I choose to." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a slim tablet, tapping quickly before turning it toward Caleb. The screen displayed a student performance graph. Caleb's name was at the top. "You tested in the top 1% of the state," Maddox said. "In math, science, and written comprehension. You scored higher than most students at Ridgeview, including Chase Harrington." Caleb stared at the screen, barely able to process it. How do you know that?" "I keep my eye on promising minds," Maddox said. "Especially the ones no one else bothers to notice." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You remind me of someone I used to be," he said. "A long time ago I stood where you stand, underestimated, dismissed, told I didn't belong. But someone gave me a chance. That's all it took." He paused, letting the words settle. "I don't believe in wasting potential, Caleb. And I don't believe in letting bullies win, whether they wear Letterman jackets or tailored suits." Caleb's throat tightened. For the first time, someone with real power, someone who didn't have to care, was standing beside him. Not because he was famous. Not because of money. But because it was right. The sky over Ridgeview Academy darkened slightly as thick gray clouds began to gather. But no one was looking up. Their eyes were locked on the black helicopter circling once overhead, then slowly descending onto the courtyard with the same commanding presence as before. This time, the crowd was already waiting. Students lined the walkways, cell phones raised, faces drawn in anticipation. Teachers stood awkwardly behind them, whispering nervously. Word had spread like wildfire: Maddox was coming back. And he wasn't coming alone. The rotors kicked up leaves and dust as the aircraft touched down. Students shielded their eyes. Blazers flapped in the wind. Principal Rivington stood near the main steps, flanked by members of the school board. His complexion was pale, jaw stiff. Just behind him stood Chase Harrington, his usual smugness long gone, fingers twitching at his sides. The helicopter door swung open. Lawrence Maddox stepped out first, his long coat trailing slightly in the wind. He didn't look left or right. He didn't need to. Power followed him like a shadow. Behind him came Caleb Turner, straight-backed, chin high, the hum of nervous energy rolling off him in waves. The murmurs exploded. "Is that really Caleb? He's back, with him? No way." Maddox walked straight toward Rivington without pausing, stopping only a few feet from the cluster of administrators. The crowd fell silent. The only sound now was the clicking of phones recording, the occasional rustle of wind. Rivington tried a polite smile. "Mr. Maddox." "I'll make this quick," Maddox cut in, his voice sharp and perfectly projected. "I have no interest in drawn-out meetings or empty statements. I'm here to offer this school a gift. $15 million. A collective gasp swept through the courtyard. Rivington blinked rapidly. $15 million? "Yes," Maddox confirmed. "An unrestricted donation. But it comes with 3 conditions." He turned slightly, his eyes sweeping across the watching crowd. 1. Caleb Turner is to be reinstated immediately and with full honors. 2. Principal Rivington will issue a public apology for the wrongful expulsion and discriminatory behavior. And 3. Chase Harrington will be suspended for his repeated acts of bullying, including documented verbal harassment. The silence was electric. Chase's face turned crimson. "You can't do this, my father." "Is free to call me," Maddox said without looking at him. "He knows the number." Rivington turned toward the board members. They whispered among themselves, anxious, some nodding, others paling. The weight of Maddox's presence, and the sheer scale of his offer, pressed on them like a boulder. "This is highly irregular," one board member murmured. "And what you did to this boy wasn't?" Maddox asked, calm as a blade. There was a pause. Then another board member whispered, "We can't say no. Not to this. Not with everyone watching." Indeed, the students were filming everything. The story was already spreading online. The image of a billionaire standing beside a farm boy he came to defend, it was irresistible. Rivington swallowed hard. Very well. Caleb Turner will be reinstated immediately. I apologize for the oversight. He turned toward the students, face tight. We deeply regret any unfair treatment. Caleb said nothing. He didn't need to. Justice, at long last, was speaking for him. Principal Rivington stepped forward, the microphone trembling slightly in his grip. His usually confident posture seemed to shrink beneath the weight of hundreds of eyes, all staring, waiting, and recording. Students lined every edge of the courtyard, phones raised like torches. The buzz of live streams hummed beneath the surface of silence. Caleb stood beside Lawrence Maddox, just a step behind, arms folded calmly across his chest. His expression was unreadable. Not proud. Not angry. Just steady. Chase Harrington stood to the side, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the ground. The color had drained from his face. He looked smaller than he ever had, like a boy whose father's name could no longer protect him. Rivington cleared his throat once, then again. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin and brittle, like old paper. Good morning, students, faculty, he hesitated. And Mr. Maddox. He tried to smile, but it fell flat. Today, I am here to address a grave misjudgment. A student of this institution, Caleb Turner, was recently expelled under circumstances that do not reflect the values Ridgeview Academy claims to uphold. After further review, it is clear that this decision was made hastily, and without proper regard for fairness, evidence, or character. He looked over at Caleb, but Caleb didn't meet his eyes. I offer my sincere apology, Rivington continued, the words dry in his mouth. To Caleb, to his family, and to any student who has ever felt unseen or unworthy because of where they come from. There was a pause. Effective immediately, Caleb Turner is reinstated as a full student of Ridgeview Academy, with all honors and privileges restored. The crowd was silent, still holding its breath. A few glances were exchanged. A few students lowered their phones, as if unsure of what to feel. Then Maddox gave a small nod toward Caleb. It was his turn. Caleb stepped forward. He didn't take the mic. He didn't raise his voice. But somehow, everyone heard him. I never needed their apology, he said quietly. But I needed the world to see it. The words floated in the air, simple and clean, and they hit harder than any shouted accusation ever could. Caleb looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some ashamed, some stunned. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just stood tall in his hand-me-down jacket and scuffed boots, and for the first time he felt seen, not for where he came from, but for who he was. Somewhere in the back, a student clapped once. Then twice. Then the sound spread, hesitant at first, but growing, until it rolled across the courtyard like thunder. Applause, real and raw, broke through the stillness. Rivington stepped back, his face unreadable now. Chase Harrington didn't move. And Caleb? He just nodded once to Maddox, as if to say, I'm ready. The applause faded slowly, replaced by a hush that hung in the cool afternoon air like the last light of day. Caleb turned, casting one last glance at the place that had both broken and revealed him. The school courtyard, the faces behind screens, the stone walls that once loomed so large. He didn't feel small anymore. Lawrence Maddox stepped beside him, his coat billowing gently in the breeze. It's time, he said, his voice low, calm. Caleb looked at him, hesitant. But I thought I was staying. Maddox shook his head, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You could. And no one would blame you. But I'm offering you something more. He nodded toward the helicopter, now warming its engines again. I'm giving you what no one gave me at your age, a chance. Caleb blinked. A chance at what? Maddox's smile deepened, but it wasn't smug. It was something closer to hope. To learn. To lead. to grow into the person you were always meant to be. I've started a program for students like you. Students who were told they don't belong. You'll be the first. You'll train with my team. You'll see the world beyond these walls. Caleb looked back once more at the school, the place where he'd fought so hard to prove his worth. For a moment, part of him wanted to stay, just to show them he could. But another part, the deeper part, knew Maddox was right. This wasn't about proving himself anymore. It was about becoming something bigger than they ever imagined. He turned back to Maddox, a quiet resolve in his voice. I'm in. Maddox nodded once. Good. They walked side by side to the waiting helicopter. Caleb's parents stood at the gate, watching, their faces a mix of pride and disbelief. Caleb gave them a small wave. His father nodded, his mother wiped her eyes. As the blades began to spin faster, wind tugged at Caleb's coat. He climbed aboard, settling into the leather seat beside Maddox. This time, he didn't look back. The ground shrank beneath them. Ridgeview became a cluster of stone and grass, the students' little dots, their cameras still raised. But Caleb wasn't part of that world anymore. He was moving forward. Maddox looked out the window, then turned to him. This is just the beginning, Caleb. Caleb leaned back, heart pounding, eyes wide with the weight of possibility. For the first time in his life, he didn't just hope for something better. He knew it was coming. The helicopter rose steadily into the sky, its blades slicing through the air with practiced rhythm. Below them, Ridgeview Academy shrank into a cluster of slate rooftops and brick walls, surrounded by trees that had long turned bare in the winter wind. Caleb leaned forward slightly, peering out the window. From this height, the school looked peaceful, almost beautiful. But he knew what lay beneath that surface: the silence of overlooked students, the coldness of polished hallways, the weight of unspoken judgment. That place had once made him feel small, powerless, invisible. Not anymore. He let out a slow breath, his reflection catching faintly in the glass, older than yesterday somehow. Not in years, but in knowing. Beside him, Lawrence Maddox sat with the calm of a man who had seen the world bend and break, and had shaped it back with his own hands. He didn't speak for a moment. Just watched the horizon. Then, without turning his head, he said quietly, "One day, you'll change someone's life too, just like I changed yours." Caleb didn't respond right away. He stared out at the world beneath him, the farms, the roads, the lives below, and wondered how many other kids were out there right now, feeling the same way he had just days ago. Unseen. Unwanted. Unworthy. He turned slowly to Maddox and gave a quiet nod. "I hope so," he said. Maddox offered the faintest smile. "You will." The aircraft soared higher, cutting through the gray clouds as if nothing could stop it. And in that moment, Caleb Turner no longer felt like a farm boy from the edge of a forgotten town. He felt like someone becoming. Someone with a purpose. Someone who would never again let the world define him by the dirt under his fingernails. Someone who, one day, would reach back and lift someone else the same way he had just been lifted. The helicopter tilted slightly toward the city skyline, its sleek silhouette gleaming against the afternoon light. The past faded below them, and the future opened wide ahead. And for everyone watching, if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD, where we bring you real stories about justice, second chances, and human dignity.